Hey guys, this is my part 2 on how to save seeds from tomatoes. We're doing tomatoes specifically, but we're going to do some other vegetables later. So in the first part I showed you the easiest way to save tomato seeds. You don't really need many steps, you don't need much equipment, just a paper towel, and then you just kind of fold them up in the paper towel, and I explain how to do that and why. And now I'm going to show you the one that has a few more steps, but in the end you end up with seeds that look a lot more like what you would expect to get out of a seed packet, and I explain more of that in the first one. What I forgot to mention though is that the very most important first step is to always play good music in your kitchen. Alright, so I hope that the background music isn't too distracting. I didn't listen to my first one to see if it was, but I mean, I don't make the rules, guys. It's just gotta happen. So I'm going to show you the method now that by the end of the few steps that we do, you end up with these seeds that are kind of clean looking and dry and ready to be put into little packets, and that's actually how I'm gonna sell them. Because I'm selling seeds now, apparently, because I named my own tomato variety after Brandi Carlile, and I'm gonna sell the seeds to benefit my community garden. If you don't know that story, you can check it out. So I talked about in the first, I'm gonna just quickly touch on it. In the first video, I talked about how the seeds actually have to ferment a little bit inside all of that gel. So when you cut open a tomato to see where the seeds are, they're in that gelatinous gel stuff. And that gel actually has a job to do. It needs to ferment a little bit as part of the process where the seeds become viable and ready to germinate. So the first method I showed you in a paper towel, this method, you're going to start with a little jar, and I use some bottled spring water. I don't know that that's necessary, but I'm in Chicago and our water, our tap water, is fairly chlorinated, and I figured that probably isn't great for this process of the seeds. Like, I do fermentation and stuff, and you've got to use bottled water. You can't use tap water for normal fermented, like hot sauces and stuff that I like to make. So just to play it safe, I use some bottled water. If you want to try it with just regular tap water, especially, I just put the wrong lid on that. If you want to try it with regular tap water, especially if you don't have chlorinated water, then that should be alright. So you start with your jar, and then you're going to do the same thing that I did with the paper towels. You can just, the gel and all, you just drop it all in there. So when you're cutting open your tomato, so you've got all that gelatinous stuff in there, and that's got the seeds on it. I'm just plopping it all in there. You don't need to try to separate the seeds from the gel. I do the whole tomato, but if you're cutting open the tomato for like an actual meal, like a sandwich or something, then you can just do part of it, because the gel is also the tastiest part. That's where all that lycopene is. That's really healthy for you too. So this is what I do. I actually do multiple tomatoes. I'll just fill up this jar. You see, I've got a lot of tomatoes I have to get through because I'm selling a lot of seeds, apparently. It's awesome, guys. So I would go through this tomato meticulously, getting all of the seeds that I can all into this, and then go through lots of other tomatoes. And then at the end of the process, you put the lid on, not tight, just on a little bit. I don't tighten that down. And then I mark on top. You could use a piece of tape if you don't want to write right on the thing, but I wrote Carlile Heart's Content. Normally I think you would also write the date, but I know that I'm going to come back to these because they don't stay in here long. So what's happening inside of here is that you're actually just going to let them ferment a little bit. You actually want to see this start to go off a little bit. I meant to have one ready to show you, but like a little bit of mold on top, it's fine. That's why you leave the lid open a little bit. You want some ability for gases to exchange. Like whenever you ferment something, that fermentation process releases gases. And so you want that to be able to, it's called burping, you want to be able to burp the jar. So that's pretty much it. You can fill that up with as many, you want to use the same tomatoes so you don't have, a mystery bag of tomato seeds. You fill that up and you set that aside somewhere, and not in a refrigerator, just room temperature. And at least 3 days, I've been leaving them for about a week, just to make sure that we got a decent amount of that fermentation process. I wait till I see a little bit of mold forming. And I've noticed, and I'm used to fermenting, so I know what that smells like. I've noticed when I open it back up, it's got that kind of sweet, that perfect like fermentation smell. That's kind of like sweet, maybe a little like yeasty. It's a very unique smell. Anyways, That's what you're going for, and so at least 3 days. I could do a week. If you went longer, I think that's totally fine. And then the next thing that you do, you're going to want a fine mesh sieve like this, and you're going to then just go over your sink, dump it out, and then just rinse and rinse and rinse and rinse and rinse for a really long time, because some of that gel, you know, it's kind of a thick gelatinous substance, and it'll eventually go through this fine mesh. You just have to keep rinsing for a good long time until you feel like you've got some pretty cleaned off seeds. And then what I do is I leave them in this and set that aside somewhere where they can fully dry, and I check on them every once in a while. These have been drying for about a week, and I'm going to give them just a little bit longer. They've been drying for about a week. I could probably put them in their envelopes by now, but just playing it safe to make sure. And I kind of, sometimes they end up a little clumped together, so I just sort of go through and break them apart a little bit, tell them how sweet they are, tell them we love them, things like that. Anyway, so I've got these paper. You always want to keep seeds in paper, never plastic, all right? In my last video, I showed you all of my paper towel ones that I roll up in paper towels. I keep them in this box. If I were to take this paper towel and then store it in like a plastic Ziploc bag, those would start to mold. And I know I was saying mold is a good thing in some of this process, but we don't want the seeds we're saving and all that gel to just start molding badly. Those seeds are then going to start to decompose in the mold. So we don't want that. We want them able to totally breathe and not to be trapped in plastic. So anyway, this is going to sit on my shelf. I'm going to actually fill it up with a lot more tomato seeds, but it's going to sit on my shelf for about a week. And then I'm going to dump it out into my sink, rinse for a really long time, and then leave them like this for about a week. And then when they're all dry, they're going to go into a paper envelope. And then I always label well, that's the Carlisle Heart's Content. And I write the year 25, and then I wrote parentheses good, which means that like I feel like they're sellable because they look pretty. I did the whole drying them off thing, and they're not just like shoved in a paper towel like I showed you in the first video. So that's it. Thanks, guys.